Citroën BX16RS. Hi, I'm Vince. Welcome to the Vinceunlimited channel and a new Vinceunlimited Cars video wherein I continue my history of car ownership with the true story of my Citroën BX16RS. It was 1984 and we were in need of another car. The Renault 6, which I introduced in my same titled video, had finally persuaded Linda and I that its clutch wasn't long for this world, so we sold it. The whole car, not just the clutch. That bit was fast becoming worthless. By now, I'd got a job, so we had a few more spare pennies each month, allowing us to be a bit more frivolous with our purchasing. With Linda's enthusiasm for all things brand new, apart from me, coupled with the fact I had never owned a new car, we started to look at what the dealerships might offer. So instantly made our way straight to the Renault garage where her family had jointly bought their last 3 vehicles from. I was no particular fan of Renaults myself because their lineup at the time was uninspiring. They had the aging pressed tin 4, the chubby little 5, the uninspiring dated 6, 2 boring box-shaped saloons in 9 or 18 patterns, and the Fuego, the expensive, dumpiest fastback on the planet which no one had ever owned. Except Linda, of course, a year or 2 back. But they had recently released a new, updated Model 9. More modern in styling with a sharp looking front end incorporating quadruple lamps, more reminiscent of a Lancia than a Renault, which is never a bad thing. Unfortunately, the designer popped to the loo before he got to draw the back end and they just used an Etch-a-Sketch to finish it. Luckily, by the time we got to the dealership, the designer had finished his ablutions and had set about creating a new hatchback end. So improved from the stage saloon rump that they called it the 11, as it was at least 2 better than the 3-box solution. So we borrowed one for a day-long test drive. We decided to visit my family, who were unimpressed, largely because no one from our side of the street had ever seriously been able to entertain buying a new car, and their spotty 22-year-old fresh out of unemployment was hardly likely to break that mould. We were told to take it back to the adults and apologise for stealing it. We were more smitten though. It was smart and modern, both inside and out, and like all Renaults, extremely comfortable. We were leaning towards a high-spec 1.4 litre GTS model, so started to get together our finances and chose colours when we had an epiphany. We saw a big roadside poster of a car we'd never seen before and it looked fantastically modern and chic. The poster gave no obvious indication of who built it, leading with huge lettering claiming the car loved driving and hated garages, clearly implying it wasn't a Citroën. We checked more carefully and upon closer inspection the car was indeed a Citroën, a BX. Brand new into the country within the last few months, and with its 1980s angular hatchback looks, it was like nothing we had seen before. Apart from a vague styling nod to earlier Citroëns, our experience of which until that point were mixed. My brother Mark had owned an old white DS. It was like being in a spaceship designed in the Victorian era, but more comfortable than nestling in a freshly laundered bed. It swooped about with a lightness of steering, strange swivelling front lights and a button mushroom to call upon the braking system. The dials and switches were somewhat unconventional and placed at random places about the car, which itself rose and fell at the behest of the owner or upon accelerating or cornering, and not always in the direction one would expect. All this strange and lovely comfortableness supported upon metal bowls filled with green fluid located under the wheel arches, which eventually leaked all over the road whilst my brother was taking a guitar lesson. The unreliability didn't put Mark off though, as he then bought one of its smaller brothers, a GS, which was slightly more modern, slightly less weird, and slightly more suffering from our let you down at the most inconvenient time syndrome. Linda's brother Kevin also rambled on fondly about the brand and had long harboured thoughts on changing his Renault, the aforementioned Tubby 5, in a would a man really buy it in that colour yellow? He was going to change it for a GS himself. Side note, he never did because he bought a CX instead, then an XM. But only after he bought a... Hang on, the story isn't there yet. We suspended our prejudices and hot-footed it to the local Citroën garage where we discussed the car. Not that we could actually get to properly see one, it was that new. Notwithstanding this small hurdle, we agreed to buy one and chose the BX16RS version. They even threw in a free hotel stay as an inducement to buy, which clearly sealed the deal and saved us paying for our upcoming honeymoon stay. The BX16 was selected rather than the BX14 because in cars, bigger numbers are preferable, and the RS because it was better equipped than the base model. We could have gone all out on the TRS version, but felt the extra money for plastic windowlets in the C-pillar wasn't worth the upgrade. The 1580cc petrol-fueled motor would put out 91 horses when spun over 6,000 times per minute, providing 97 units of imperial pulling power at lower 3,500. But as it was French, the figures were 68 kilowatts and 131 newtons respectively. Which is all utter tarot merd, because who cares about how many horses are put out? It's far more important to know why 91 were on fire in the first place. The net result of all this revving and powering was a 0 to 60 time of under 11.3 seconds, which I know because records indicate they could go to 62 miles an hour by the 11.3 second, and then proceed on to do 176. But this was because it was French, and they measure in something called kilometres, which are like miles only in France. In England, where I was, you could only get to 109 miles an hour. That never happened anyway. It had to be run in. There's a certain thrill of driving away a brand new car. The excitement that you were the very first person to drive it. After the man driving off the production line. The factory delivery driver who puts it on the lorry. The guy who loads it onto the ferry. The one who drives it off the ferry, the other end. The person who puts it on the transport in this country. And the other who gets it off the other end, before being tested by the PDI technician and used by the salesman who nips out in it to get his sandwiches on the Tuesday before you arrive to pick it up. That is once it's been driven about the place by the valet cleaner, of course. But you believe you're the first one driving it, and you find yourself edging out carefully onto the highway with not a care in the world. Apart from a real fear of every other road user who seems to be eyeing you up and waiting for an opportunity to administer the first scratch or dent. Along with that underlying gut feeling that you've just spent far too much on what amounts to a piece of metal sculpture. In fact, a lot of it wasn't even metal. The modern Bertone design penned by Marcello Gandini incorporated a newfangled lightweight materials for the bonnet, hatch and bumpers. Not carbon fibre, just a form of wobbly plastic, like some big red Reliant Robin. Yes, it was red, a deep postbox red with a suitably contrasting light grey interior finish. We had opted for the fabric seats as leather was a spend too far, but they were accommodating and adjustable enough to get all the strange and quirky controls that Citroën decided to design into the first variant of this model. For example, the indicators were not on handy stalks like every other car, but instead incorporated into a rocker switch on the top of the lightning cheek protruding next to the binnacle, a handy finger stretch away from the wheel. All well and good for operation when approaching a bend, provided the bend wasn't ahead of a long curve when your hands may have not been in the ideal position to reach. Plus, their lack of proximity to the wheel shaft meant that no self-cancelling function was incorporated. So more thought had to go into reposition your hands for indicator cancelling after a manoeuvre as well. The speedometer was also different from standard cars of the time. Instead of the normal big dial and sweeping pointer, the speed numerals were printed on a vertically rotating drum, which rolled past a fixed point line. All very Star Trek, all very difficult to read at a glance or at night. One thankfully useful feature was a standardised DIN space for a retrofit stereo, a common upgrade to cars at the time. And we spent our time hunting out a fantastic Pioneer setup, incorporating a slick KEH 9300 head unit coupled to a pair of TS168 door-mounted speakers, and another stunning pair of powerful TS2000 speakers inset into the hatchback cover, which created a great, deep, lustrous sound using the whole boot space as a bass box. We had to incorporate quick-release audio leads and found the structural reinforcing within the plastic cover made it difficult to add extra strengthening to dampen out the uninvited audio-induced bounce every time the volume went up. Citroën fitted the car with its famous hydro-pneumatic suspension. Still using the gloopy green gunge that had visited the road outside my brother's guitar learning shop, but this time reliably contained within the pipes and spheres of the car. This gave it 4 settings of height, maintenance level for fans of low riding, standard, raised and fully raised for wheel changing. It always travelled best in standard mode because raised firmed up the ride to extremely bumpy. As the years passed, we saw a number of older BXs travelling out on motorways in raised mode, which meant one of 3 things. Firstly, that the system had failed. Secondly, the operator didn't know they could or how to alter the setting. Or thirdly, the driver was an idiot. When driving our new correctly set up car, it felt light, modern, free revving and comfortable. The manual 5-speed gearbox slipped into each ratio nicely, although being a bit spongy in feel, plus the power assisted steering was super light. The interior was spacious and having a fastback always assists the practicality. The only real fault being the aforementioned non-cancelling indicators. In fact, I'm pretty sure they were still clicking quietly on and off when we sold it, which is so much sooner than one should for a new car. It's not that there was a problem. In the single year of our ownership, it never beat a beat. Unfortunately, it also never missed the company entrance gate post I drove through either, but that minor scrape was soon fixed. We had used it to visit the north, a campsite in the west, and to compete in a local manoeuvring contest held by our Institute of Advanced Motorist group, wherein I proved conclusively that I could have missed the gate post if I had tried harder. The reason we sold it was I got a new job. This came with not only a new gate post entrance, but more importantly to this tale, a fully expensed company car, rendering a second vehicle a bit of a luxury that we had to fuel ourselves. Linda carried on commuting in the BX for a while, but we decided to sell it to Kevin's partner Rob, who needed some wheels and a mint condition. Once the door was repainted, Citroën was a great deal for both of us. We got back some useful cash, and he got a pretty new low mileage car that he kept for a number of years, with a banging stereo fitted. My own Citroën bubble had been pricked, but the experience was far too good to be so short-lived. I would no longer refrain from visiting the brand again, and I didn't, but that story is for another day. So, thank you for watching my video, particularly if you've lasted this far, which may mean you enjoyed watching it. If so, perhaps you might like to consider tapping the like button. If you shared similar instances of buying a new car you've hardly seen, then why not add a comment below? Plus, if you've done all that without subscribing, then you're missing an important part of the process. To wrap up, I'll let you know a few facts about my particular car because it may interest you whilst you're watching the manoeuvring sequence in all its glory. The BX was launched onto the right-hand drive UK market in August 1983. A949RBK was the first registered by me on the 10th February 1984, and the last V5C was issued on the 13th February 1988 with the car tax running out on 1st of August 1999, which means it lasted 15 years and 6 months. The DIN space is a reference to a standardised opening panel space of 180mm by 50mm for dashboard mounted head units as prescribed in ISO 7736. I wrote and first published this tale on my now defunct Vinceunlimited website, version 5.309, on 30th of May 2020, and on the same day I also published a story on my vinceunlimited.wordpress.com website, where it still lives.